What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk about a very interesting rumor, but something kind of feels off about it. So this rumor actually was a few days old at this point. I was thinking about, just kind of letting it go, but I got some interest from the community, and I thought, all right, let's kind of dive into it. It's a pretty simple rumor, and the rumor boils down to this. Sony is backtracking on the live service and, investing in themselves, investing in these other companies that are going to help them or make games off of existing franchises. I think like the rumor maybe is like Wipeout and stuff. There's some odd stuff going on. Now, here's the deal. I want it to be true. We've talked about live service so many times, and I tend to get like the same comments too, where it's like general agreement with me, and then there's also people that say, well, as long as they still do the single player stuff, and if you want to try the live service, there's ways of it working. And I agree. I think live service, I personally do not like live service at all, but I understand it's a money maker. It is the popular thing, right? And games that are successful in the live service genre, they're the big dogs, right? I can sit here and gloat about Alan Wake 2 every single day, but ultimately Alan Wake 2 is not going to make a blimp on the people that play Fortnite and Apex and all these games, right? Like, those are the big things. So I get the desire to do live service. I think it's possible to make good live service games. It's just what I've always said. I think at some point you're already kind of seeing it. There is a lot of crashing and burning. There's a lot of companies that pivot in terms of what they're good at, and then they try to do live service, right? Normally, I mean, sometimes they just shift entirely, but most times they're good at one thing, they force the studio into a live service game, it fails because the studio doesn't know how to do it, or the expectation is whatever, and then they kind of learn their lesson and come back. The reason I say something feels off here is because while I want it to be true, and while I think it's for the best that Sony doesn't go down this road of, as we've talked about, 50-50. For the people that say, well, the first party, the single player games, like that's, their bread and butter and that's what they're sticking with. Yes, to an extent, but remember, they've literally Sony has shown their plans going forward for PlayStation. And it's in the next 2 or so years, it's going to be a 50-50 split. So it is not a majority first person, the Uncharted's of the world, the Infamous. I mean, these are like older franchises, right? But it's not that. It's some of that, Horizon, but then it's also, for every one AAA Spider-Man game, you're going to get a live service game. They've admitted that. And I think it's about time that we take them seriously, right? So why do I say something feels off about the rumor of them dropping that? Well, they haven't failed yet. That's literally my answer. They haven't failed at it yet. And the rumor just kind of feels off in that way. So look, yes, Naughty Dog has probably expressed some, there's the stuff behind the scenes with that Connie Booth and maybe some rumors that internally PlayStation Studios are not fighting them, Sony or PlayStation, but they're not happy. They're not happy with, and that came from David Jaffe, and he likes to exaggerate quite a bit. But you had even Tom Henderson chiming in where he believes that a lot of the industry is not happy. Most studios, when they're told to pivot, specifically to live service games, most studios do not like it. They do it because they kind of have to, but they don't like it. So what I'm going on is not David Jaffe's kind of exaggerations, but the idea that, okay, you have Sony. Yes, it's true. It's true. The studios most likely, I think it's fair to say, don't like the direction that they're being pushed into. And that's bad. That's ultimately very bad. And that's why I continue to say, I do want them to drop it. I want the rumor to be true. But besides that, the internal kind of dialogue that may or may not be happening, Naughty Dog, the rumors of on and off again of The Last of Us multiplayer, they haven't failed at the games coming out yet. The games haven't come out, right? So when they talk about those 10 games in the next 2 or so years, I mean, they keep getting delayed, right? We haven't had any of them released yet, but eventually we're going to have a year for PlayStation, like it or hate it. Again, that's the overall theme, right? It's not what I want, it's what's happening. And those are two separate things. Eventually we're going to get a year where Sony or PlayStation puts out 3 or 4 live service games. Here's where I'm going with this. I do think there will be a point where they will drop it. Not a pivot. What's the definition of pivoting? Like a very, very hard turn where they say, this is not working, we got to do something. I do think that could happen. I think it's actually more likely than not. Because simple stats, as I always kind of say, right? You look at the biggest live service games, you don't see the thousands of failures. When you look at the top 15 on Steam, right? Because it's easy, right? You can see the player count. When you look at those numbers, that's a lot of people. There's only so many people playing games. There's only so much time in a day when you're supposed to play these games all the time, every day. So constantly adding games, the punishment is that some games won't be played. So you see the Dead by Daylights and the Rocket Leagues and the Fortnite and the Apex and all these games. But you don't see the 50 or so every couple months that release, or let's say like 10 a month that come out, that completely bomb. They don't have they have 2,000 players, 1,000 players. Now, some of them, maybe that's enough to make it go, right? But if you want to look at me with a straight face and say that Sony is doing all this so that 2,000 people a day play The Last of Us multiplayer, you're insane. You look at me with a straight face and you tell me that that would be okay by Sony, right? So the idea is, I think, Sony wants these games to come out and they want them to dominate. Now, Jim Ryan did say before he left, and I guess he's still technically there, but a few months ago, he did say in an interview he doesn't expect them all to do amazing. He does expect some to do better than others. But my point is, I do think some are going to come out and many of them are going to kind of flop. I just think because, again, there's only so much time in a day. There's only so many games you can play. And also what he said, some games are going to maybe just be better or suited for a larger audience than other games. So some of them are going to work, some of them are not. I think you need that to happen in order for them to change their direction. I mean, we talk about it all the time with the we've made videos, the Ubisoft, EA. I've used the example of EA is not perfect, okay? Don't get me wrong, or don't twist my words. The, football and just sports in general with EA is still atrocious. Battlefield, they're figuring it out and ongoingly, right? But they're working on it. And I think overall, they have learned specifically the idea of, well, we want all these single-player games to just be multiplayer stuff, the Anthems, the BioWare kind of mistakes that have happened. I think they've realized that. And why? Why did they realize that? Well, because it failed. It happened. It had to actually happen, release. They had to get hit over and over to realize, oh, we are doing this wrong. We had it, and we dropped it, and we need to get it back. Hence, Mass Effect, basically hiring most of the team, or at least some of the team, that made the original games, right? Dragon Age was supposed to just be a multiplayer game, and they canceled that, and they said, okay, you can make your single-player game. You learn from the mistakes, and, I would prefer PlayStation in particular here, because I think there's so much talent, and there's talent across the entire industry, but, again, specifically here, would I like them to learn the mistake before it happens? Yeah, that would be ideal, but that is hard. That is very hard. So, I keep saying it. While I want the rumor to be true, the idea with Ubisoft and EA and CD Projekt Red, like with Cyberpunk, right? How do things change in the industry? Well, they can change pretty fast. Like in the span of 2 to 4 years, which the rumor is, by the way, and I think it's kind of like a cop-out because they say, well, you're not going to see it right away. This pivot or this change that Sony is doing, you're not going to see it right away. It's going to take 4 or 5 years for you to see it. See, that that is true, but I feel like they're just kind of saying that to back themselves up and say, well, I'm lying, but, you're not going to be able to call me out for like half a decade, because I did say it's going to take half a decade to happen, right? Which is true. You need these games to come out. You need them to do bad. Now, I'm not saying like purposely, but, just let the cycle happen. Let people decide if this is a good or bad thing. Maybe some of them, as I said in the beginning, maybe some will be good. I mean, I've said like, I'll play a Twisted Metal live service game. I will. Do I prefer it? No, but I'll play it. The Last of Us, I'll play the multiplayer. I've been excited for it. But, if it's bad, I'll call it out. If it's good, I'll say it's good. That's just who I am, right? So I think the cycle will take its course. People will decide. I am confident in the idea that the live service push to make it 50-50 split is not going to work. That is a terrible idea. I've voiced that, the past year and a half very loudly, okay? That's how I think it's going to play out. I don't know that for sure, but I think that's how it's going to play out. But it needs to play out, as evidenced by everything else in the industry. Sony needs to, and again, it's needs, wants, what will happen, what should happen. You got to be careful how you word things. I think what will happen is they will try. They will try to make these work. They will release many of these games that they've said they're going to release over the next 2 to 4 years and making it a 50-50 split. They will do that. That will happen. Is that a good idea? No. Are they going to try it? Yes. And then I think is when you would change course. And again, the good news is I don't think it takes much time, because although the gaming industry is so big, makes so much money, is bigger than Hollywood, as we constantly say, the money can dry up really quickly. These studios can get shut down, as we've seen, like in a heartbeat, right? Money can dry up very fast. So if they come out with 4 live service games in a year and they all fail, they take a hard look in the mirror and say, what went wrong? Now, hopefully they know the right answer, right? Not, oh, well, the studio did this. No, maybe it's because you made the studio that, was good at one thing, you made them do something else. Maybe that's what was wrong with it. And that's normally what happens. And then you pivot, you change. But the mistakes need to happen first. And that's the that's the terrible part. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying like we're smarter, we're better than them. Obviously, they get high paychecks to do a lot of high scale things that we don't. But I will say, honestly, like, I feel like we can kind of see it coming. I do think it's not going to work. So, yeah, best case scenario is they would be able to catch it. There is enough stuff where maybe they can start to ask questions, right? When you have The Last of Us multiplayer just not, and only they would know, right, how it's doing. Maybe they take a hard look and say, like, is it the right move making Naughty Dog do this? And then they say, okay, well, not just Naughty Dog, right? Let's take it a step further. We know it kind of didn't work here. Are we making a mistake across the board? You hope that those questions come. You hope that if all of your studios express that they don't want to do it, this is a mistake, if David Jaffe's right. And like I said, Tom Henderson has kind of backed him up that it's an industry thing. But I guess the thing is, then obviously it doesn't work, right? Studios across the industry saying they don't want to do it. They're forced to anyway. It's ongoing. They are doing it, and they are kind of failing at it. So I don't think that's going to work, but you would hope that that's another kind of proof that something else that's happening, right? Where Sony looks and says, well, is there a reason why almost all of our studios, some of them like are good at it, right? Bungie, that Fire Sprite and stuff, some of them were built to do it. But when all of their studios that weren't built to do it, when they voice their displeasure, does Sony look and say, yeah, this is a mistake? You would hope, but it really, sadly, it doesn't seem to work that way. I think it needs to actually happen. These games need to come out. They need to run their course. Some of them will probably do good. Some of them will completely bomb. And that needs to happen, I think, for this rumor to actually come true. They need to see it. It needs to affect them. It needs to affect their pocketbook. The money needs to not come in from these live services. That's literally, the world is run on money. The gaming industry is run on money. These companies, right? If they're not getting checks because of these live service games, they look at them and they say, you know what, this was a mistake. They did it too late. But then there's time, I guess, to pivot. You can't make the same mistake 2 times in a row when you're as big as the Xbox, right? Like the big companies. You can't really do that. So let me know what you think. Hopefully you like this video. I think this is pretty fun to talk about and record. But let me know what you think. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.